The storm had rolled in fast across the high plains that evening, sweeping over the Montana hills like a pack of wild stallions. Ethan Cole had seen plenty of weather in his years as a rancher, but nothing like this. Wind howling like it carried ghosts, rain striking the dry earth with fury enough to drown the prairie grass. He'd just locked up the stables when he spotted a figure stumbling down the road, a woman, small, half covered in a soaked shawl, holding on to something tight against her chest. Her boots sank into the mud with every desperate step. Ethan, being the sort who couldn't let even a stray calf suffer, grabbed his lantern and ran out through the sheets of rain. "Miss, you'll catch your death out here," he shouted, his voice nearly stolen by thunder. The woman didn't answer. She just clutched that shawl closer, shivering like she was made of glass. When Ethan reached her, the lantern light caught her face, and for a moment he forgot how to breathe. She wasn't from around here, that much was clear. Her features were delicate, city-bred maybe, but her eyes... Lord, her eyes looked like someone who'd run from more than a storm. They darted around the dark like she feared something was still chasing her. "Come on," Ethan said, taking her arm gently. "My ranch ain't far. You'll warm up by the fire." She hesitated, as if torn between trust and terror, but another crack of thunder sent her trembling into his grasp. He guided her toward his house, his duster flapping like a flag behind him. When they reached the porch, he noticed she kept her right hand clutching her throat beneath the shawl. Not once did she let it go. Inside, the cabin smelled of cedar smoke and rain-soaked leather. Ethan threw another log on the fire, hung his coat, and fetched her a blanket. She sat stiffly on the chair near the hearth, refusing to meet his eyes. Her hands, pale and trembling, gripped that shawl as though it was the only thing keeping her from breaking apart. "What's your name, miss?" Ethan asked quietly, crouching a few feet away so as not to spook her. She looked at him then, eyes shimmering in the firelight. "Clara," she whispered. Just Clara. It sounded like a name half told, like she'd dropped the rest of it somewhere on the road. "Well, Clara, you're safe here," Ethan said. "I've got stew on the stove, dry clothes in the trunk. You can stay till the weather passes." She nodded but didn't move. Her lips parted slightly as if she wanted to say more, but then she caught sight of her reflection in the window pane and flinched. Ethan pretended not to notice, though curiosity clawed at him. Something about the way she held that shawl, the way she refused to remove it, made his chest tighten with questions he didn't dare ask. Hours passed. The storm softened to a drizzle, but Clara stayed near the fire, silent except for the occasional sigh that sounded more like pain than relief. When Ethan brought her tea, he noticed the faint outline of something beneath the shawl at her neck. Something metallic, maybe a chain or clasp. She caught his glance and quickly turned away. "Please," she murmured, almost inaudible. "Don't ask me to take it off." Ethan froze for a heartbeat. "Wouldn't dream of it," he said gently, though the words stirred something uneasy in him. Later that night, when she finally slept by the hearth wrapped in blankets, Ethan sat in his rocker, staring into the flames. Who was she really? Why had she been walking alone in that storm? And what was she hiding beneath that cloth tied around her throat like a secret she'd die to protect? As the firelight flickered across her face, he saw the faintest glint of silver peeking from beneath the edge of the fabric, like the corner of a locket. But then she stirred, mumbling something in her sleep, a name maybe. "James. Please." And Ethan leaned back, swallowing his questions. He didn't know if he was sheltering a lost soul or a fugitive, but something deep in him, some instinct older than reason, told him he couldn't let her go. Outside, the last rumble of thunder faded into the hills. Inside, a rancher and a stranger breathed the same air, two lives on the edge of something neither of them yet understood. And in the quiet between the wind and the firelight, Clara's hand reached up in her sleep, touched the edge of the cloth around her neck, and whispered again through trembling lips, "Please, don't take it off." When Ethan woke at dawn, the storm had left the world washed clean. The plains outside his window shimmered with dew, the air smelling of sage and wet earth. He rose quietly, careful not to disturb his unexpected guest. But as he stepped into the main room, he found Clara already awake. She was standing near the window, staring out at the sunrise like it was the first light she'd seen in years. Her shawl was still draped tight around her neck, her small hands gripping it as if she feared the day itself might strip her secrets away. "Morning, Miss Clara," Ethan said softly, setting the kettle on the stove. "You sleep all right?" She turned slowly, and a small smile flickered across her lips. It was the kind of smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, but it was something. Yes, thank you. I didn't mean to trouble you, Mr. Cole. Trouble? He chuckled, pouring coffee grounds into the pot. You walked into a thunderstorm alone. I'd say it's the Lord's doing you made it this far. I just did what any man ought to. She looked down, fidgeting with the end of her shawl. Not every man would have stopped, she said, almost to herself. Ethan didn't answer that. He'd seen enough in life to know she was right. Out here, kindness was a currency few could afford. But something about her, something in the way she spoke like she carried sorrow too heavy for her slight frame, made him wish he'd found her sooner. They shared breakfast in near silence, save for the clinking of cutlery and the low hum of the wind outside. Ethan told her about his ranch, the cattle he tended, the creek that cut through the back acres, the old oak that marked his father's grave. She listened quietly, her gaze flickering now and then to the door, as though she feared what lay beyond it more than she feared him. After breakfast, Ethan offered her a clean dress from his late sister's old trunk. Clara hesitated before taking it, murmuring her thanks. When she reappeared minutes later, the dress fit her loosely, but it made her seem softer somehow, less like a shadow and more like someone alive. Still, that shawl remained. Ethan was mending the corral fence when he saw her come outside, standing at the edge of the porch. The sun caught in her hair, lighting it like copper. For a moment, the ranch seemed brighter for her presence. She watched him work for a while, then wandered toward the stables, her steps uncertain but curious. Never been around horses much, have you? Ethan asked, leaning on the fence rail. Clara shook her head. Not since I was little. My father kept a few, but... She trailed off, eyes glazing for a heartbeat with something that looked like pain. It feels like another life. He nodded, sensing not to push. Well, they're gentle if you are. Here, this one's Duke. She reached out tentatively, her fingers trembling as they brushed the horse's nose. Duke huffed softly, nuzzling her palm, and a small laugh escaped her. Pure, surprised, like she hadn't heard her own laughter in years. Ethan felt something shift in him then, a warmth spreading beneath his ribs. That afternoon, Clara helped him gather eggs, her nervousness giving way to shy smiles. Yet every time the wind tugged at her shawl, she'd flinch and grip it tight. Once, when he offered to hang it by the fire to dry, she shook her head violently. No, she said, her voice breaking. Please, don't ask me to take it off. Ethan froze mid-step, hands raised. All right, Clara, I won't. The fear in her eyes lingered long after her words faded. He wanted to ask what she was hiding. What could frighten her so deeply? But one look at her trembling hands told him the truth might be worse than anything he could imagine. As the sun dipped low, painting the plains in gold, Ethan noticed the way she'd glance toward the distant road whenever a wagon passed. Her body would stiffen, her breath would catch. It wasn't the look of someone waiting, it was the look of someone running. That night, after she'd gone to bed, Ethan sat at his kitchen table, staring at the small silver hairpin she'd dropped by accident. It was delicate, engraved with initials barely visible in the firelight. J.H. He turned it over in his fingers, wondering what name those letters belonged to. Her husband? Her brother? Or someone she was running from? When he looked up, Clara stood in the doorway of the bedroom, pale as snow. Where did you get that? She asked, her voice sharp as a knife. Ethan blinked. You dropped it, I was just... Please, she whispered, stepping forward. Don't touch it. It's not mine. I shouldn't have brought it here. Before he could ask, she snatched the pin, pressing it to her chest as if it burned. Her breath came in ragged gasps and tears welled in her eyes. Ethan reached out gently. Clara, you're safe here. Whatever that is, whatever happened, you can tell me. She shook her head, backing away. You wouldn't understand, she said, her voice trembling. If you knew who I was, you'd send me away. Ethan's heart clenched. Try me. For a long moment, the only sound was the crackling fire. Then she sank into a chair, hands shaking, eyes fixed on the flames. The man I loved, James Hargrove. He was killed 2 months ago. Everyone thinks She stopped, breath catching. They think I murdered him. Ethan's breath hitched. The initials on the pin, J.H., now made cruel sense. I ran, she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. I didn't do it, but they wouldn't believe me. They said I was jealous, that She covered her face. I left everything, even my name. Ethan sat back slowly, trying to piece together the fragments. A wanted woman, a murder. A secret hidden beneath a shawl. He should have been afraid, or at least cautious, but all he felt was a deep ache for her. "You're safe here," he said finally, voice steady. "I don't care what they say. I'll protect you." Clara looked up, eyes wide, disbelief softening into something like hope, but still her hand went to her neck, fingers clutching the fabric as if even his kindness couldn't reach what lay beneath it. "Thank you," she whispered. "But there's more, Ethan. There's something you don't know. Something I can't hide much longer." Outside, the wind rose again, sweeping over the plains like a warning. And though Ethan didn't yet understand it, that secret she kept so fiercely beneath her shawl, the one she begged him never to uncover, was about to change both of their lives forever. The next morning dawned quiet, the kind of silence that feels heavy before something big breaks loose. Ethan had slept little. He'd lain awake on the couch, listening to the faint sound of Clara turning restlessly in the next room, her muffled whimpers twisting through his chest like thorns. When the first streaks of sunlight crept through the window, he rose, poured black coffee, and stepped outside to clear his thoughts. The ranch stretched before him, wide, golden, endless. But somehow it felt smaller now, as if the weight of Clara's secret had settled over every acre. He'd promised to protect her. But protect her from what? The law, her past, or the truth itself? When he returned inside, Clara was at the stove, her movements graceful yet tense. She'd taken to helping him around the house, cooking, cleaning, anything that made her feel useful. It was the first time Ethan had seen her sleeves rolled up. Faint bruises marked her wrists, old ones that told stories of struggle. He noticed but said nothing. "You didn't have to cook," he said softly. "It helps me think," she replied, not looking up. "Or not think, I suppose." Ethan nodded, setting his hat on the peg. "Clara, about what you said last night. About James Hargrove." Her hand stilled mid-motion. For a moment, the only sound was the hiss of bacon. "Please," she said quietly. "Don't say his name." "Not yet." He hesitated, then sat down. "All right. But if you're running from the law, they'll come looking. There aren't many roads out here. Someone will see the smoke from my chimney before long." She finally turned to him, eyes rimmed red but fierce with something like resolve. "Then I'll be gone before they arrive. I've already brought too much trouble to your door." Ethan stood, taking a slow step forward. "You're not going anywhere, Clara. You didn't kill that man. I can see it plain as day." Her lips trembled, and for a heartbeat she looked like she might collapse. Then she whispered, "You don't understand, Ethan. I wasn't his wife. I was his property." He blinked. "Property?" Clara's shoulders shook as she sank into a chair, her fingers gripping the edge of her shawl. "James Hargrove bought me. Not with money, but with promises. My father owed him a debt, and when he couldn't pay, I was sent to live at the Hargrove estate in Virginia. I was 16. He said I was to be his companion, to learn refinement. But he lied." The words hit Ethan like a hammer. The room seemed smaller suddenly, the air thicker. "He kept me locked away," she continued, her voice breaking. "He controlled everything, the clothes I wore, the letters I sent, even the name I used. The shawl—" She paused, fingers trembling as they brushed the cloth at her neck. "He gave it to me. Told me I'd wear it always to remind me I belonged to him. When he died, I thought I was free, until I realized freedom meant running." Ethan's throat felt tight. "You didn't kill him, did you?" She looked up sharply, eyes blazing through her tears. "No, but when I tried to leave, they found him dead and me gone. His brother said I poisoned him. The sheriff never asked for my side. I barely escaped with my life." Ethan exhaled slowly, dragging a hand through his hair. Everything she said rang true, the fear, the scars, the desperate way she clung to that shawl. But still, something gnawed at him. "Clara," he said carefully, "why are you still wearing it? If it reminds you of him, why not throw it away?" Her face went pale as snow. For a long time she didn't speak. Then, in a whisper that made his skin crawl, she said, "Because if I take it off, you'll see what he did to me." Ethan's chest tightened. He stepped closer, slow, careful, like approaching a wounded animal. "You don't have to show me. Not until you're ready." But Clara shook her head, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. "You deserve to know. You've been kind to me, kinder than anyone since I can remember. But I can't stay here pretending to be someone I'm not." Before he could stop her, she untied the knot at the back of her neck. The fabric loosened, slipping from her shoulders like a falling petal. Ethan froze as the cloth dropped away, and beneath it, he saw the mark, a brand not like cattle, but deliberate, elegant, twisted. burned into her skin just above her collarbone, the letter H, carved in cruel precision. Ethan's breath caught. For a heartbeat, the world stopped moving. Clara stood there trembling, arms folded over herself, eyes full of shame. "He did it himself," she whispered. "Said if anyone ever saw it, they'd know who I belonged to. That no man would ever want something another man had branded." Ethan felt sick, rage boiling up like wildfire in his gut. "That monster," he growled under his breath. He took a step forward, then stopped when she flinched. "Clara, I swear to you," he said softly, his voice shaking. "You're not his property. Not anymore. That mark doesn't own you." She looked at him like she wanted to believe it but couldn't. "You say that now," she said, her voice trembling. "But I've seen the way men look when they know. They pity, or they hate, or they leave." Ethan shook his head slowly. "Then you ain't met the right man yet." Her breath hitched, eyes glistening. For the first time since she arrived, she took a step closer to him. "And you think you are?" He swallowed hard, the fire crackling between them. "I don't know what I am, Clara, but I know this: no brand, no past, no man dead or alive tells me who you are. Only you do." For a moment, silence filled the room. Then slowly, Clara reached for his hand. Her fingers were cold, trembling, but she didn't pull away when he wrapped his around hers. "I don't know why you're helping me," she whispered. "Because," Ethan said, voice low, "you walked into my life like a storm, and I reckon I'd rather face 100 more just to keep you safe." Outside, the sky darkened again, clouds rolling in from the west. The wind howled across the prairie, rattling the windows as if echoing the fury of a world that had wronged her. But inside, for the first time, Clara stood without her shawl. And though the scar on her neck would never fade, the fear behind her eyes began, at last, to soften. Just a little. For the next few days, the ranch seemed to exist in a fragile kind of peace. Clara helped in the kitchen, fed the hens, even tried her hand at milking, though she laughed nervously every time the cow swished its tail. Ethan had never seen anyone try so hard just to feel normal, and it humbled him. Each morning she'd stand on the porch watching the horizon like she expected the past to ride out of it at any moment. And though she wore her shawl again, it wasn't out of shame now. More like armor, a reminder that she'd survived what should have destroyed her. Ethan tried to pretend life was ordinary, but his heart wasn't fooled. Every time he looked at Clara, something deep inside him stirred, a fierce mix of protectiveness and yearning he couldn't name. He'd spent years alone on that stretch of land, content with his solitude until she'd appeared like a lost song in the rain. Now, the thought of her leaving clawed at him worse than any storm. One afternoon, while fixing the north fence, he saw a dust cloud on the road. 2 riders approaching slow and deliberate. Ethan's gut tightened. He set down his hammer, squinting through the glare. Even before he saw the tin badges glinting on their chests, he knew. Lawmen. By the time he reached the porch, Clara was already there, her hands white around the edge of her shawl. She didn't need to ask who it was. Her eyes said she already knew. "Stay inside," Ethan said firmly. "Ethan," he touched her arm gently. "No matter what they say, you let me do the talking, you hear?" She nodded, pale but composed, and slipped back into the house. Ethan took a deep breath and stepped down onto the dirt just as the riders pulled up. The taller one dismounted, a hard-eyed man with a trimmed beard and the weary air of someone who'd seen too much of the worst in people. His partner, younger, scanned the place with quick, sharp glances. "Mornin', mister," the older man said. "Name's Marshall Crane, out of Red Creek. We're looking for a woman traveling alone. Goes by Clara, or maybe not. Might be using another name. Heard she was headed this way." Ethan kept his expression calm. "Haven't seen anyone like that, Marshall. Storm hit pretty bad this week. Not much traffic on this road." Crane studied him, eyes narrow. "Mind if we look around?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "Got nothing to hide. Long as you respect my property." They tethered their horses and started poking around the yard. Clara watched from behind the curtain, her breath coming fast and shallow. Ethan felt it from where he stood, the pulse of her fear beating through the house. Inside, the younger deputy wandered close to the barn. A few minutes later, he emerged holding Clara's shawl. She'd dropped it near the milking pail earlier that morning. "Found something, Marshall," he called. Crane took it, frowning at the embroidery. "This looks mighty fancy for a ranch hand's wife." He turned his gaze back to Ethan. "You sure you ain't harboring a fugitive, Mr. Cole? 'Cause if you are, that makes you just as guilty." Ethan's voice was steady, but his pulse thundered. Marshall, I don't take kindly to being accused of something I ain't done. Now, if you'd care to tell me what she's wanted for, maybe I could help. Crane's expression hardened. Murder. James Hargrove, Virginia. Stabbed in his own parlor. We got witnesses saying a woman with a mark around her neck was seen fleeing the scene. Ethan's throat went dry, but he didn't flinch. And you figure she came all the way out here? We follow trails, Crane said. She's close, I can feel it. If you see her, you let us know. The lawman turned to leave, and Ethan thought they might ride off. But then Clara, in a sudden fit of resolve or despair, stepped out onto the porch. I'm right here, she said. The world seemed to stop. The wind, the creak of the barn, even the horses, all silent. Ethan's heart dropped. Crane's hand went to his revolver, though he didn't draw it. Well, I'll be, he muttered. Ma'am, you're a long way from Virginia. Clara lifted her chin. I didn't kill him. Crane's expression didn't soften. You'll get your chance to say that in front of a judge. Ethan stepped between them. You ain't taking her anywhere. Step aside, Mr. Cole, the marshal ordered. She's wanted by the state. Ethan didn't move. His voice came out low, dangerous. She's wanted by no one who matters. Crane scowled. You obstruct the law, I'll have to... Marshal, Clara interrupted, her voice trembling but clear. Please, you need to hear me. James Hargrove's brother, he's the one who killed him, I saw it. He blamed me because he couldn't bear losing his inheritance. That's why I ran. Crane looked uncertain for the first time. You got proof of that? I have the letter, she said quickly. It's hidden in the lining of my shawl. Ethan's eyes widened. That's why you wouldn't let me touch it. She nodded faintly. I've carried it for weeks. His confession. He thought I was asleep when he wrote it. Crane motioned for her to hand it over. Clara unstitched the hem with shaking fingers, pulling out a folded paper worn thin from travel. The marshal read it silently, jaw tightening as his eyes scanned the words. Then he exhaled a long breath. Well, I'll be damned, he muttered. Looks like you were telling the truth, miss. Clara's knees buckled and Ethan caught her before she fell. Relief and exhaustion poured from her in a single shuddering breath. Crane folded the letter carefully. I'll wire this to Virginia. Might take a week or two, but you're cleared as far as I'm concerned. When the lawmen finally rode off, the sun was setting behind them, bathing the land in soft gold. Clara stood on the porch, tears glistening in her eyes, staring after them like someone seeing freedom for the first time. Ethan turned to her. You're safe now. She shook her head slowly. No, Ethan. I was safe the moment you found me in that storm. He looked at her then, not as a stranger, not as a fugitive, but as the woman who'd somehow become the heartbeat of his lonely world. Without a word, he reached out and took her hand. She let him, and for a long, quiet moment they simply stood together, watching the last light fade over the hills. Two souls who'd both been branded by the past but somehow found healing in each other's hands. The days that followed passed with the slow rhythm of peace, the kind of peace neither of them had known in years. The air was cool now, autumn settling gently over the plains, turning the hills amber and the sky pale blue. For the first time since Ethan had found her in the rain, Clara no longer looked over her shoulder when the wind changed. The fear that had shadowed her face was fading, replaced by something softer, something almost radiant. Ethan noticed it most in the mornings. She'd hum while pouring coffee, her voice low and sweet, drifting through the kitchen with the smell of fresh bread and pine smoke. Sometimes he'd stop in the doorway just to watch her, sunlight spilling through the window across her hair. He never said it aloud, but he'd come to love that sight more than any sunrise. He'd lived a long time believing his heart was too worn for love. Ranching was his life, the land his only companion. But Clara changed that in ways he couldn't explain. She'd brought warmth to the cold corners of his world, the kind of warmth that didn't ask for anything in return, only gave. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the cottonwoods, Ethan found her sitting by the creek behind the house. She'd taken off her shawl again, letting the breeze move through her hair. The scar at her neck caught the light like silver. For the first time, she didn't try to hide it. Looks like the world's finally quiet, Ethan said, settling beside her. Clara smiled faintly. It feels strange. Not to be afraid. You got every right to rest now, he said. You earned it. She looked down at the reflection of the sky rippling on the water. When you found me, I didn't think I'd ever belong anywhere again. I thought that Mark meant I'd never be free. She turned to him then, her eyes full of warmth and sadness all at once. But you never looked at me like I was broken. Ethan's jaw worked, his voice rough when he spoke. You ain't broken, Clara. You're the bravest person I've ever known. For a while they sat in silence, listening to the creak. Then she reached for his hand, her fingers slipping easily between his. Do you ever think, she said softly, that God sends storms just to lead us where we're meant to be? He chuckled under his breath. If that's true, I reckon I owe him a thank you. She laughed quietly, leaning her head against his shoulder. The sound was small, but it filled the fading evening with something warm and alive. That night they lit a fire outside and ate supper beneath the stars. The sky stretched endless above them, full of silver light and far-off dreams. Ethan told her stories about his father and the first herd he ever broke, how the land used to scare him with its emptiness until he learned to love its silence. Clara listened, smiling, her face bathed in firelight. When he finished, she whispered, You make the world sound safe. He looked at her for a long moment. It ain't always safe, he said softly, but it's better when you got someone worth fighting for. Her eyes shimmered as if the stars had found their reflection there. And you think I'm worth fighting for? Ethan reached over, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. Darlin', I already did. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The fire crackled. A coyote cried somewhere far off, and the wind carried the scent of sage across the valley. It was one of those rare moments when the world felt perfectly still, as if even the heavens were holding their breath. When the first frost came a week later, Ethan built a small garden fence on the south side of the cabin. Clara planted the seeds herself, wildflowers, not crops. Because, she said with a shy smile, I think this place could use a bit of color. By spring, the flowers bloomed. Bluebonnets, daisies, golden brush. The ranch seemed alive again, not just with color, but with laughter and music. Clara played the old piano Ethan's mother had left behind, and sometimes he'd sit beside her, pretending he wasn't tone deaf. Though she'd laugh each time he missed a note. The scar on her neck never vanished, but she stopped covering it. It's part of my story, she told him one afternoon, touching it gently. But it doesn't define me anymore. Ethan looked at her then, standing in the sunlight, the wind catching the hem of her dress, and thought she looked stronger than any woman he'd ever known. No, he said quietly. It don't. You do. That evening, when the sun sank low and the land glowed in shades of rose and gold, Clara turned to him, her eyes full of something soft and sure. Ethan? Yeah? She smiled. I'm home. He didn't answer with words. He just pulled her close, the prairie wind sweeping around them, the sky burning orange and gold above their heads. For a long moment, neither of them moved, two souls scarred by life but healed by love, standing together where the world was wide and endless. And as the last light faded behind the mountains, Ethan thought that maybe the storms of life weren't curses after all. Maybe they were how God cleared the sky so the sun could find its way through again. Because there, in that quiet corner of Montana, with Clara's hand in his and the world turning gold once more, he knew he'd found something that would never fade. He'd found home.